Hello, it's a privilege to be here today with Iona for our Tango Wisdom Virtual Summit discussions on community. Welcome, Iona.
Thank you.
So, Iona, I've been starting all the interviews just basically asking where you are and where are the other places in the world that have had an impact on you, whether you've lived there or that their cultural significance, so that we can mark them on the map.
So I'm going to actually just show you where I am. I am right here. It's a little early in the morning for a tango person, and I am in Pune in India, a small town not far from Bombay.
Excellent. And where else, Iona? You've lived other places,
Oh,
and so
yes.
please.
Well, I have lived so I grew up in Karachi, Pakistan. I have lived later I moved to the UK. I lived mostly in London and in Scotland. I have lived in the Scottish Highlands. I have lived in Germany. And I've spent time in Japan and in Sri Lanka. And I've also lived in the States, in Los Angeles and later in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. And you're most recently coming from Buenos Aires, true?
And I'm most recently coming from Buenos Aires. I forgot the most important one. It's early morning brain. Of course, I feel like that goes without saying. It doesn't even need to be mentioned. Yes, I was living in Buenos Aires before I came here, and probably I will return. It's a little unclear how long my India trip will be. That will depend on my visa situation. But yes, for the past 11 years, I've been living in Buenos Aires. And now I have been in India since late September. And I was living here in Pune, and I moved to Bombay actually a few weeks ago. But I'm back visiting Pune today.
All right. So I asked you here, Iona, because for a couple different reasons. The first is I think it's fascinating that you've lived in so many places and dancing tango and are now in India, which, I don't have any experience being in India. And you write about the encounters that you've been having and some of the things, but I think in my curiosity, and I would imagine that there's other curiosities out there about what you've discovered in the various communities that you've lived, whether they're the similarities or the differences in those communities.
So I would say, well, I think communities within Europe and the States are really can't be differentiated geographically. Individual communities can have their particular characteristics, but really it doesn't matter whether the community is in Phoenix or in New York City or in Paris. That's all one kind of cultural zone as far as tango is concerned. Obviously, Buenos Aires is different, and I would say the main difference between those communities in Buenos Aires, and we'll come to India maybe a little later, is that in Buenos Aires there's a very strong focus on freedom of partner choice, whereas outside of Buenos Aires, particularly in smaller communities, there's more emphasis on what I would call community service. So in Buenos Aires, people tend not to dance with other people out of duty. They dance only because they actually want to, even if the person is even if they're friends or even if they're actually sitting together at a table for the evening, um, even if they are the student or the teacher or whoever else it might be. I think that there is a very strong ethos of free choice. Um, and outside of Buenos Aires, well, for visiting teachers, there's a necessity to dance more widely because they need to um, win students and popularity. And some of them manage to convey, manage to look very convincingly as if they're enjoying dancing with everyone. But I am skeptical because I've seen them back home where they dance, very, very selectively. Um, but of course, it's different if that is part of the expectation of your job. And also, I think there are many more people who feel that there is a duty to dance around more widely. And this can be both positive and negative, of course. It can be very positive in that it will can help to grow the community, to keep people engaged who would otherwise lose interest or get disheartened. It helps to kind of balance out discriminations that there might be, particularly against older women who tend to be a large demographic outside of Buenos Aires in the tango community. And may not be as good dancers sometimes because they started later in life and are also maybe less attractive to the guys in just a biological sense. So it can create a nicer atmosphere, but it can also create a lot of sense of obligation and entitlement. So there's two sides to that coin. And I would say there are two approaches. In Buenos Aires, the friendship is one thing and dancing with a person is another. And dancing is always based on just the wish to dance with them. It's rarely based on anything else. Whereas outside of Buenos Aires, there's more of a sense of dancing with people for social purposes. I'd say that's the number one difference. There's also a difference that I've noted, which has been so far universal everywhere I've gone outside Buenos Aires, which is that in Buenos Aires, as you know, when you go to a class with perhaps a very well-known teacher, you'll find that there are other well-known dancers in class, taking class as fellow students and taking correction often from teachers who are their peers, not necessarily even from the very old teachers who are the renowned maestros. But it was very common for me to see other well-known dancers in seminars at La Maleva, for example, who were there to study and to learn. I think that's a uniquely wonderful thing in Buenos Aires as well. Mm-hmm. And in India, there are many other issues. Maybe we'll come on to those later.
Yeah. So I would love for you to talk about India, now, just because that's, where you've come, and you didn't come to dance. You didn't go to India to dance tango, but from what I see, it looks like you're really doing a lot of tango. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so actually I came to India because my father was Indian. He was born in Bombay. And he was a Parsi. This is patrilineal, so therefore I'm also Parsi. And I wanted to explore my Parsi roots and the Zoroastrian religion. And then what happened actually is that initially I was planning to go to Bombay, but I couldn't find any accommodation there before January. So through people from the tango world, this wonderful guy called Alex Ramat offered to let me stay with him in Pune to bridge that time. So I came here to Pune for 2 months, and I decided as a kind of thank you to Alex that I would teach in Pune and get involved in the Tango community here. And that I really was expecting. The community in India is very young. The dancers are very inexperienced. I was expecting not to enjoy the dancing, actually. My intention was to help out as a thank you to my host, not to really get suckered back into tango. But then I think a couple of things happened. One is that I met a dancer here called Manish Damani, and who is also, you can tell that he's a less experienced dancer, but he has really, I feel he really has a huge amount of potential, and he's a very fast learner. Despite having had really no real continuity of teaching, despite being so far away from the motherland and being only having had kind of visiting teachers passing through occasionally, he's really sort of built something that is going right. And so that happened. And also I discovered that I'm very interested in the intersection between Indianness and tango. And although I felt as though I had nothing more to write about tango, I have collected my writings into 3 volumes, which are going to appear. I'm publishing them with Malonga Press with Michael Avoca. First volume should be coming out in April. And those 3 volumes are only a tiny, tiny sliver of everything that I've written. So I felt as though I'd written about tango from so many angles and in so many different modes, in fiction, in rants, in arguments, in analyses, in translations, that I felt as though I have nothing more to say. And suddenly coming here, I feel as though not only that I have more to say, but that I'm interested in possibly writing a book that's specifically about tango in India, which I think could be a fun thing for non-tango dancers also to read. A very niche topic, but it seems to be a very fruitful topic to my imagination for some reason. So that's what happened here. And I think it's been a very interesting experience. And really, I would say a couple of things. First of all, there's some strong cultural incompatibilities between tango and Indianness. The first of which is that men and women don't touch in this country. You just put, I can't do it because I'm holding this phone at the same time, but maybe I can hold the phone somewhere. But you just, might make things more comfortable. Oh yeah, that's better. But if you just put prayer hands to your chest. So I think for beginners, it's really a challenge, not just physically, but there's some psychological challenge there in getting close. And the people who are teaching the beginners class in Pune, who I'll also give a shout out to, Iona and Italia here in Pune, told me that they have to begin, they explained to the beginners that eventually you're going to dance close like this once you feel comfortable, but we'll begin open, because otherwise women don't come because they are suspicious of men who want to hug them. They are wary of men who want to hug them. Because normally if a man wanted to hug you, that would be sleazy, unless he was a really close friend or relative. Um, so I think that's one thing. And another thing is that that I have noticed is that so Indians also marry very early in general. Most people are married in their early 20s and often in arranged marriages, though not always. Um, and so most people coming to tango are married, and a lot of those people come to tango without their husband or wife. So I think tango is a kind of way of, rather than a way of solidifying your couple, it's a way of getting a little space, a little escape from the couple and the family, which is writ so large in the rest of Indian life. And may even for some people be a more romantic space than the space of the couple itself. I feel that about perhaps a couple of people I've encountered who I know had arranged marriages and whose other half seemed to be nowhere to be seen. This is obviously not true of everybody. For some people, it's just simply the husband-wife doesn't want to dance, and so it's nice to have a separate hobby. But I think that's a little bit of a factor in the Indian scene, and it's something I haven't noticed elsewhere. These husbands, wives going to tango without the other half, and the other half is maybe never seen.
Yeah.
And I think that also, at least a good friend of mine, Indian friend, has the theory that that's also why in India there's an especially strong emphasis on rotating partners. So they always change partners in lessons, even in workshops and at festivals, where normally people would go and work with the same partner. Indians always rotate, or at least as far as I have seen so far. Of course, someone may write in to tell you that where they are, this isn't the case. And also at the Milonga, or even at the Praktika, absolutely nobody dances consecutive tandas with the same person. Always you swap. So that's two things I've noticed specifically about India. And I would say there are perhaps a couple of other factors, which are bigger factors in Bombay than here in Pune. The two scenes are incredibly different. And I have to say that although obviously there are people in Bombay who are lovely people and good dancers, there are in particular Kruti Gandhi Sarda, I will give her shout out. In general, the Pune scene is much, much more successful. So the level is much higher here in Pune, even though Bombay is a much larger scene. And the atmosphere is much pleasanter. And I think that one thing that happens in India is there are almost no local teachers, or no local teachers who are at a higher level of dance themselves. There are people who can get beginners engaged, but there are far fewer people who are able to really teach themselves because the scene is just so young. Nobody has the years of experience. Most people have danced 5 years or less, and those who've danced for longer have danced for longer, but without any teaching. So then they're really not in a position to teach themselves, although kind of valiantly attempting. But so they're very reliant on visiting teachers. But at the same time, it's hard for visiting teachers to earn money here because you cannot charge Indians 100 euros for a private lesson. You charge Indians 10 euros for a private lesson and maybe €1 for a group class. So, but one way to attract people is to give them a free trip to India and really look after them when they're here. And so I think there are a lot of Indian organizers who are kind of wealthy benefactors of tango, I would put it that way, who have beautiful houses which they open up to visitors, and have servants to bring your chai tea and can wine and dine you and take you to the yacht club and spoil people. And I think this is a wonderful thing. You know, it's wonderfully generous of the individual people. But it also leads to the kind of development of little fiefdoms, which in Bombay, unfortunately, I don't know, you know, whether this will continue to be the case, but have at least historically been warring fiefdoms. So that's a kind of unfortunate factor. And it also means that, it also can mean, it depends on the organizer, of course, but it can mean that the people taking artistic decisions, like which teachers to invite, how the teachers, what they want the teachers to focus on, what they would like to have taught, etc., are often people who aren't really dancers themselves. And I think that certainly in some places, the teachers have been asked to teach fancy figures to a group of students who are really, very few people are even at intermediate level. This is a beginner level. You know, people are beginner level here because they just haven't been dancing for very long, and there has not been much, there's not been consistency of teaching available. So those are some of the advantages, disadvantages, and pitfalls. And I would say that in the other major pitfall, which this is not unique to India, but is something that happens in small, isolated communities, is that people have no sense of the level of their own dancing. And for some reason in Pune, I don't know why and how they have managed this in Pune. I think it's because of the people, Iona Italia and Manish, my dance partner, who began the scene here, and their personalities. In Pune, people's attitude is extremely humble. So in Pune, when teachers come, they ask them to work on fundamentals. People are very, very open to correction. They are ready to do this work, which is actually exciting work if you have the courage to do it, which is to allow the teacher to tear apart everything you're doing and rebuild. The tearing apart is a necessary part of the rebuilding. And I think that's an act of a certain bravery and confidence that you have to know, if I change everything, I let go of everything I'm doing now in my walk, I'll still be able to find a good walk again afterwards. So there's a certain courage that takes, and confidence actually. But it's not a smugness. It's not, I'm really proud of the way I'm doing my walk right now, and nobody is going to tell me differently. And I'm not going to listen to anyone who criticizes it. So that's kind of, I feel like, it's not real confidence, it's more like a bravado. And I've certainly encountered quite a lot of people in Bombay who have that attitude. They think their dancing is already great, and so what they want is some fancy adornos or complicated figures to add to it. They want to supplement what they already have, but they don't realize that what they already have is, you know, it's true of all of us. It's not just true of them. What you have at the fundamentals is something that is always, you need to be always working on, changing, growing, altering. That's where the real important work takes place. And I think that is why the level is so much better in Pune than in Bombay on average. Because here, for some reason, people have grasped that. And in Bombay, many have not. And of course, it's kind of a self-fulfilling thing. That when a lot of people around you feel that way, you start to feel that way as well. Both in the good model, the Pune model, and the not so good model, the Bombay model. And it's quite innocent, you know, because you don't have a frame of reference. So you can go either way. You can go to this humble kind of open thing, or to this I'm already amazing thing. I think that's not India. That's just human psychology happening. And sometimes with people who are very humble and lovely people in other aspects of their life. Um, but they really want to be good at tango, and they're really afraid of being bad at tango. And so they're clinging to this illusion of themselves. You have to have you have to lose the fear that you may actually suck. If you suck, it doesn't matter. Knowing you suck is the first step to improving.
Right, right.
and um, it's also, it's not such a terrible and awful big deal to suck, actually.
There's room to grow.
There's room to grow, and it's not, we all suck in our own ways, it's not important to be a good dancer. It's important to be a good person, but it's not important to be a good dancer. You shouldn't invest your ego in that. You should try to be the best dancer you can, if that's where you want to invest time and money. Some people don't, they just want to dance socially at the level they're at, and that's also totally okay. There's no ethics here. But if you feel like it's really important to think of yourself as a good dancer, and therefore you're clutching onto that image of yourself, and any criticism that you get, any more kind of like fundamental criticism, is going to destroy that, and so you can't let the criticism come near you. That's a very, I think, emotionally and psychologically fragile and counterproductive place to be. And I notice many people here in that place, here in Bombay. In Pune, no, because nobody is there. It's not, it doesn't seem to occur to anybody.
It speaks highly of the teachers, that you're referring to.
Yes, I think the human quality of people in Pune is very impressive. I'm very inspired by their people.
And that could be useful in any community, is the people factor. That yes, we come to dance, we all want to dance and enjoy the dance, but we're coming together as social beings.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's really important to model humility. I mean, this may not be possible when you're teaching. When you're the teacher in the community and that's your role, then at that moment when you're in the class teaching, you have to show confidence. Because if you don't think you're already competent enough, you shouldn't be teaching. So at that moment, that's fine, show the confidence. But when you have a visiting teacher, go model kind of learning, show that you are taking class, you are practicing, you are working on things in your dance, you're ready to take criticism, including very profound criticism that goes deep. To improve, you have to change things in the core of the dance, not fiddle with the outer things. Oh, I add a little adorno here and a little adorno there. No, you have to change how you step and hold your body. I think even though you can't model that when you're teaching, show confidence. But whenever you get the opportunity, if you are a teacher in the community, model learning. And I think that the other thing I want to say about learning is that it's really not a linear process. So your level can stay the same for a very long time, and then suddenly you can have a spike. And also you can actually, lose it again if you don't keep practicing. Although I feel that if you were a great dancer and you lost it because you weren't practicing or you didn't have opportunities to learn, you can usually get it back much more quickly than if you had to start from scratch. So it's not completely lost. It's there somewhere. But you may have to do something to boost it back up again. So it's not linear, and it can't be measured in years or even hours. Because sometimes you're just plodding along, and other times you have insights that are transformative. That's definitely been my personal experience. And I also think that one thing that stymies learning is restricting who you can learn from. Um, so obviously you can only learn from people whose dance and whose knowledge of the dance you respect. That's clear. Um, but I think you don't have to learn from people in a particular style or with a specific technique. I think that actually the much more important thing is learning to learn. So you learn how to be aware of your body, how to monitor what is going on within the body, how to kind of tell if you do this thing, what effect will it have. And that you can learn from anybody who has good technique. And it doesn't matter, in a sense, what their technique is. And in fact, it's like growing up bilingual, that bilingual children at first take a little longer to become fluent in language in general. But then their fluency is greater than that of someone who learned only one language. I feel like be bilingual in your learning. And think about what each teacher specifically has to offer. So maybe the teacher, maybe you want to dance something that is softer, more snuggly, more milonguero, but the teacher is really from a stage and balletic tradition. So you're not as keen on the way they embrace, or you think the movement is too stiff. But look at some of the things that they have. Look at how they control balance in the body. Look at the kind of skill of control over their footwork. And I think, for example, stage dancers, to take one extreme, have amazing attitude, and that's something most people lack. Most people, the gap between what they're feeling inside, the strength of what they're feeling when they dance and what they're showing is very large. And stage people, with the kind of attitude and projection they have, they help you to narrow that gap. And it's very empowering and healing when there is a closer correlation between what you feel and what you show.
Mm-hmm. And so, as there's so many ways to learn and so many things to learn in tango, I'm curious as to what your observations are of what inspires people to learn tango in India, with the world that it is today, and of course tango being everywhere. But what about it draws people there in India to learn this dance?
I don't know. I actually haven't asked them, and I should have done.
Well, maybe you can later and then get back to me. I'd love to hear.
Okay. Yes, that's a very good question, because it's such a small niche thing here, and it's so much not a part of the culture that it takes a certain personality to seek it out.
Yes. Yeah, and like you said, that whether it's learning for stage and having the attitude or learning to feel, there are so many ways to approach, tango.
Absolutely. I think it's important to, I used to always feel that it was all about the feeling, and I was really reluctant to work on things that seemed to me to be purely aesthetic. And I think that handicapped my dance for years, until I realized that, a thing can not look good, but it can feel really great, of course. But usually, if it can also be made to look good, it will feel even better, both to your partner and to you. That actually, there really this division between how things look and how they feel is a largely artificial division in dance. That both, the knowledge that you look good is empowering to you as a dancer. It changes the way you feel in your own dance, the level of enjoyment of your own dance. And when you are really enjoying the dance, your dance is, I think, dance is always a shared pleasure. So when you are enjoying, you are giving enjoyment to the partner. in that sense, people hate it when I compare tango with sex, but in that sense, it's like sex. But I think that I should explain in passing that when I make tango sex comparisons, it's not to equate. I'm not putting an equals line. Tango sex, very similar. You can also compare two very different things, and it can teach you. It can shed light on aspects of both separate things. So tango can shed light on what is going on in sex and vice versa, is my personal feeling. So that's not to suggest tango is some kind of foreplay. It's not putting it in the same basin. On the contrary, it's like filtering out, separating, and comparing. Like you could compare, I don't know, Republicans and Democrats without equating. But I think this kind of thing that, in general, pleasure is always pleasure shared. If you are enjoying the dance, that is enjoyable to your partner. This is something they have in common, and so there's that. And I also feel that generally, what looks good feels better for your partner in a more direct way. In the sense that, for example, better posture tends to feel better to the other person. Of course, there are postures that are too stiff, that are conveying attitude, but aren't conveying kind of warmth. So, but for me, being too stiff is also not looking good. To me, that also doesn't look good. So, I found when learning that the camera is extremely important, but very often you can feel something is wrong, but you can't quite pinpoint what it is. And so you record and you watch, and then when you watch, you can see it. And watching yourself a lot gives you a kind of self-awareness, which is really helpful to take back to your dance. So if you are have an issue of looking down with your head, and I used to have a terrible issue with this for ages, and people just telling me, put the head up, didn't help at all. But when I started, for a little while, I was practicing with my then partner by recording every song. So we would dance one, film it, and then we would watch, and then we would dance another, film it, and we would watch. And that's what cured me of the droopy head thing, because it was just seeing my head going down like that, and then dancing, and then seeing it again. It wasn't immediate. It took a lot of time, it took many hours. I'm not a fast learner in that way, but it was very effective, the awareness I got from seeing.
Mm-hmm. And so it's not only being able to learn by other people teaching, but being able to learn by looking at our own criticism about our own dance and having humility in that respect, in the videoing of it. Coming to a small community and kind of being re-inspired. And you're speaking of pleasure and pleasure in dance. Is, what do you do to keep that pleasure, whether you're in a large community or a small community, so that the enjoyment and inspiration of, why we came to tango in the first place and what keeps us there, how do we keep that?
I don't know, I feel that sometimes it's impossible to get pleasure from your local community. Some people are in that situation. And then all you can contribute to the local community in whatever way you are most willing to. Not everyone has to contribute in the same way. So I'm actually not in favor of everyone must dance widely with everyone else. Do that if that is not something that annoys you, or do it to the extent that you don't feel annoyed. Find your level there, but contribute in other ways if you can. Like, host the visiting teacher, let them stay in your spare bedroom, or bring the cookies, or whatever else it is. Go to the Milonga, pay your entrance fee, help to keep the small community alive. And for those people, for your pleasure, you will have to start traveling and find your pleasure when you're at events. I think also, I feel that if you're in a less ideal situation, so let's take the kind of least pleasurable situation. There's no one you enjoy dancing with in your community, or maybe there are, but those people don't dance with you or rarely dance with you. So the community is not giving you a lot of pleasure, and you don't have a teacher to learn from there. I would recommend to everybody doing solo technique. I actually think solo technique is really empowering and pleasurable because you have to know what you're doing. So you must take some classes first. But whenever you get a visiting teacher, ask them, particularly if you don't have a partner, to show you solo exercises and get used to and enjoy those ways of just moving the body. Enjoy that feeling of spiraling or walking smoothly or extending or whatever it is that you're practicing. And know that even if you're not in the ideal situation, you can nevertheless be growing your dancing. Solo practice obviously isn't enough on its own, but it can do a huge amount. So I'd encourage more people to do that. 20 minutes yoga practice, but just it's also building things for your tango.
And the enjoyment of be living inside of your own body and loving those movements and finding pleasure from those movements is going to give so much more to the dance itself and to your partners.
I would say it's extremely important, especially for guys. So one thing I notice happening with guys is that they're not taking sufficient from their own movements as dancers. So I often hear guys telling me, "Oh, I just dance to make the woman look beautiful," or "I'm just there to facilitate what she's doing." My heart always sinks when I hear that, and I always find those guys, or almost always, of course there are exceptions, I often find those guys, let me say, most difficult to dance with, most unpleasant to dance with. The dance is designed such that we both dance, we both make beautiful movements, and that's how it just looks good, but feels good. And I would say that in particular, I notice, and I notice that a lot here in Bombay, where there are many more beginner dancers, or actually where, with I think one exception, Kruti, who I mentioned earlier, almost everybody is at a pretty beginner stage. But I see a lot of guys, they'll start off dancing, making kind of elegant movements, and then they'll get into what I call the Hulk position, like this, like hunched over the arm like this, trying to get her to do things. And they've kind of forgotten their own posture, their own dancing yourself, your own body, not by, they're dancing, and then Hulk. Dancing, Hulk. You must know what I mean.
Yes, yes.
So I think for guys too, there needs to be pleasure in your own movements, and pride in the grace of your own movements, and care for the visual of them, because that will also help the feeling. The feeling is primary. There's no doubt. I don't dance to look good. I dance to feel good, and I'm sure most other people do too. But when I look good, that also helps me feel good, and helps the other person feel good. So for guys in particular, I would emphasize that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So you have a very prominent presence online in the tango community, and you write poetically and you put words to the experience that is tango. And so being that we're in the technological age and the virtual age, this is an important community to also remember and respect. How can you kind of give a little insight on how to be respectful in that online community and take care of each other there as well?
So this is something I personally find very challenging. Not tango related, but just in general when I'm online discussing something that I feel passionately about. I have a tendency to lose my temper easily and snap in a way that I wouldn't in real life. But there's something about the online interaction that makes me very crotchety. And I have to say, especially, this isn't very relevant to tango, but especially when I have my period, I've actually learned that I just must not go on the internet at all during that time, because I can look back at people I blocked and I can see it goes in like blobs of every 28 days. um, because yeah, I have very bad primary dysmenorrhea, and one of the symptoms is it makes me extremely angry and short-tempered. And for some reason, I'm fine in real life, but online, when you know, if there's any chance of losing my temper, it's going to happen online. Like some people when they're driving, you know, that's where they have the rage. I think I have really got better at that over the years, but I find that a real challenge. But I would say that you know, there are people who are very resentful of tango dancers, and I'm not. I actually think that on the whole, while there can be individual pockets of communities that are not very nice, that can happen. A bad atmosphere can happen, although there can always be good people even within a bad atmosphere. I would say that on the whole, I'm very, very fond of tango people. So I think outside of Argentina, it takes a lot of intellectual courage and curiosity to do this dance, which is so far from your own culture. So it means already tango dancers tend to be more open-minded. They tend to be more left-leaning and liberal, which is certainly also my own political orientation. So I feel comfortable with them in that sense. Although I'm also fine with right-leaning people who dance. You know, there's an open-mindedness there if you have approached this dance. And I've also found that people are extraordinarily generous in not necessarily in dancing. So that's the place where people have their really strong emotional investments. And I do too. If I don't want to dance with someone, it feels almost unbearable to me to dance with them, if I really don't want to dance with them. But I would happily have them stay in my flat, make them dinner, be friends, drink a bottle of wine with them. So it's not always a generosity that translates to the dance floor. And of course, that can be very problematic for some. But I think also there are many ways in which people have been extremely generous to me and to others. So, you know, just the fact that when I had nowhere to stay in Bombay, it was like my tango family who looked after me. You know, Alex, who opened his home to me, although we'd never met, and I think he'd never even met the person who put us in touch. He only knew that I was, and he doesn't use Facebook, and he has never heard of the blog, because he doesn't connect with social media. He just heard that I was a tango person, so that was enough. I think that it's important to think about how tango affects us, how tango affects your identity. You know, I believe very much that, you know, there's been this kind of debate recently about cultural appropriation. I'm not a kind of fan of that term or concept, but in tango, I feel like it's the opposite way around. Tango will appropriate you. Tango will take you, it will change you, and it will leave its mark on you. And I think that in general, that will be for the good. And I think it has all kinds of implications. For example, it's something that unites us beyond skin color, race, ethnicity, religion. None of those things are important at all when you're in the embrace with someone. And when people tell me why they do or don't dance with someone, they never mention any of those factors. I've never heard anyone say, I don't want to dance with him because he's a straight white man and straight white men supported Trump or something, or I don't want to dance with him because he's Muslim or Sikh or, I've never heard anybody express that kind of view. It's always, I don't like dancing with him because he's embraced this, he's got that, or, things that are specific to tango, or even specific to the person. And also, I think the embrace, however much you feel that it's we embrace in order to dance, nevertheless, it's the gesture that is at the heart of the dance, is this gesture which is a gesture of tenderness and love. And I think you cannot, that is fundamental and has transformative effects if you let it.
Yes. And so, along with what you spoke of, watching what you're doing online and being mindful about the conversations that you get in, is remember that, we all come together to dance, and
yes,
we generally are generous people. And I think that generosity certainly needs to be expressed online, since it's a very easy way for something to, well, let's say for not our prettiest faces to come out at times.
Yes, yes.
So
yes,
thank
people are
you.
always much nicer in real life than
Yes, yes. So thank you for always writing so generously and eloquently, because I know and I speak
My
to many
pleasure.
people that, it hits home. You're able to put words to the experience that is tango. So thank you for that, Iona.
My pleasure.
And thank you for being here today. For people that are viewing, how do they find you? And if maybe they're not following your blog, how do they learn about what you're doing and your journeys?
So you can find me in all kinds of places online. So on Facebook, I actually have 2 Facebook accounts because I have an account which is mostly non-tango. Because my non-tango friends, my civilian friends, as I call them, they complained. So that's when I originally started a non-tango one where I'm as real Iona. But my tango blog, I basically write now on Facebook under the name Iona Italia. So if you go to Iona Italia, you can also, this used to be synonymous as Terpsichoral Tango Addict, and actually if you search for that on Facebook, it will come up as well. My account should come up. I do have a blog. The original online blog was called Tango Addiction on WordPress, and I have privated that blog because of copyright issues, because I'm going to publish that as a book. So you can't actually access that, but never fear that it's going to come out as a book collection. It's a collection of fictions on a tango theme. And they're actually arranged geographically, starting in Buenos Aires and ending, the last third are set off-world, so they are in sci-fi. And then also I have, so I have the 2 Facebooks, Real Iona and Iona May Italia. I also have a Twitter account which is not tango related, but if you find me there, I'll send you to my tango things. Twitter at Iona Italia. And I have Instagram at Iona Italia also. And I have Skype, iona.italia. And I have a website which is Iona Italia, no dot, ionaitalia.com. So if you search my name in any kind of, and I think I probably even have a Google Plus account, but I haven't used that in years. So if you search my name in any of those media, you'll find me.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And you can email me at iona.italia@gmail.com.
Excellent.
And if you're interested in the book, you can contact me or also Michael Walker.
Great. And I look forward to hearing more about your adventures in India and seeing how that kind of changes your spark with tango and your relationship with it. It's fascinating. So thank
Thank
you
you.
again, Iona. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure's been mine.